My name is Ruben. I remember when I was in high school, around freshman year, my parents were going through a tough time. They were going through a divorce. And obviously, as many of us can imagine, that doesn't sound like fun, and it wasn't. The interesting thing is that during that time, I was also being exposed to the church, to ideas about God, ideas about who Jesus might be. But I couldn't hear it, and I didn't have a desire to learn anything about it or to believe anything about it. During this time, I remember I was hanging out a lot on the street. I was hanging out a lot with some friends. And during one evening in particular, I remember after being at my friend's house, after eating, after playing some video games, after walking around, that I decided to go home. It was around 5 in the afternoon. I looked for the bus stop. I hopped on the bus. I headed home. And I knew my route. I knew it because I took this route almost every day. I got off on my stop about 2 or 3 blocks away from my house. And as I got to the stoplight, waiting for the stoplight to turn green, a stranger came up to me. And immediately, because of the context in which I grew up, I knew that something was going on. Either he wanted something from me, or he was looking to do something to me, right? So I kept an eye out for him. I kept an awareness of my surroundings. And eventually he came up to me and he asked me for money. I said, you know what, I don't have money for you. I can't give you anything. During the time, I didn't really care about anybody other than myself. But eventually what happened was that he told me something that caught my attention. He said, hey, I think I know who you are. I think you're Ruben's boy, right? Yeah, you're Ruben's son. That's what he told me. But the thing that shocked me was that I didn't know who this man was. Apparently he knew who my father was. My father must have had a reputation in the neighborhood, but he knew who my father was, and he recognized me because he knew my father. He said, you're Ruben's boy, you're Ruben's son. And that got me thinking about the questions that I had about who God was. I wanted to know who God was. I wanted to know if he was real. And I wanted to know if he was real, what he was like. Eventually, I learned what John 14:9 says, where the disciples are speaking to Jesus, and they basically say, hey, I want to know who God is. Show us the Father, is what they say. And Jesus says, I've been around you for so long, and you still don't know who the Father is. Those who have seen me have seen the Father. And this clicked when I read this verse, because I remember what happened to me. This stranger saw who my dad was through me. Now, obviously, I wasn't very proud of who my father was, so it wasn't something that I was glad to hear. But now I'm glad, because I'm reminded in 1 John 3:1 that the Father, that same God that we see through Jesus, doesn't just call Jesus his son. He also calls us his children. And that's an awesome, awesome thing to know, because it changes my whole perspective about who God is. So in that time in which I was questioning who God was and if he even existed, I came to know that that answer was found in Jesus. Who God is found in Jesus. If you see who Jesus is, you see who the Father is. You see who God is. And this is my experience with Jesus.